Welcome, everyone, to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals podcast series, featuring great discussions, insight, and resources on all things related to education and administration. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the MASSP podcast. My name is Ryan Casey, and this is going to be our last episode of Season 5 as the school year winds down. Excited that we were able to bring you one more episode that's pretty timely. Because this one's going to be dedicated to anybody out there that's an administrator, principal, thinking about making the jump into central office or specifically the superintendent role. We have a couple of special guests with us coming up to us from MASB. We have Jay Bennett and Greg Sieszputowski with us, who both serve on the Executive Search Services Department. And they had a really cool podcast they did just a couple of weeks ago, talking about the state of the superintendency, what that looks like maybe at the district or moving into the ISD level. And so we kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit and see what that looks like for maybe principals making the jump. So Jay and Greg, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time.
Thanks for having us, Ryan. We're excited to be here.
Yes, we are.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, really, I kind of want to recap first that podcast you guys talked about. Now, it was an awesome podcast. It was about 35, 40 minutes. I'm going to have you try and summarize some of the things you talked about in maybe just a couple of minutes here. Can you give us a recap on some of the things that you talked about when you were talking about the state of the superintendency in Michigan in 2021?
So one of the big things that we talked about was the high number of vacancies that were open. We've seen over 100 transitions in the state this year. We as an organization have done double the number of searches that we would do in a typical year. In a typical year, we handle about 20 searches. And this year we are approaching 40 very quickly. I think we're at 39 right now. So a huge number of searches. And then the other thing that was unique to this year was not only the high number of searches that we've seen and the high number of retirements, but the large districts that have gone to search and the number of ISDs that have gone to search was a tremendously high number compared to what we would normally see.
Yeah, and how that relates to your audience is that means lots of opportunities. And so I can think of one search that we just recently completed that was filled by a current sitting high school principal that is now going to be a superintendent, in a district in Southwest Michigan. So there are a lot of opportunities out there, and we anticipate that next year will be as busy, if not busier, with searches than this year was. So we don't anticipate this slowing down. Normally, right now, we'd be wrapping up searches and just kind of winding down for the summer. But I'm in the middle of a search right now. I was in a district 2 days ago, and I will be there again on Monday to meet with the board. And so even right now in the summer, we've got some searches, and I just got a phone call yesterday on another district that has a resignation from their superintendent. So this summer looks to be busy for us as well.
Wow. So again, even more reason to thank you for taking the time to pause and do the podcast with us. Do you think, a quick follow-up, are those changes because of the impact from just a really crazy hectic year and from the pandemic and maybe people realizing whether they're getting close to retirement age or they're just, maybe it wasn't a right fit, or were we kind of heading in this direction the last couple of years where there's just a lot of turnover and a lot of opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those. I think that there's definitely an age factor in there, that we have a large number of those superintendents that have gotten to that point where they can retire. And they've decided that now is a good time to retire. I think that, COVID and everything related to it and all the other pressures that are happening in schools right now, I think it's, to borrow a much cliched phrase, it's a perfect storm. And so I think all those things have kind of come together to put us in this position where, we're dealing with a lot more of this than we have in the past. And again, I think that's kind of an indication of where we're probably headed with this, in that after this COVID and getting a lot of their districts through that, I think now they're like, okay, so I've done my part. I've got a plan in place. I've got a district through this. And now it's my time to, go off and find that next opportunity.
Yeah, I think part of it, I think part of that too is we had a number of superintendents last year that were ready to retire that said, no, I can't leave my district right now. with the pandemic and everything, I can't leave right now. So we have a number of folks that would have normally retired last year that waited. So then we had an even larger group this year, I think, as part of it as well.
That's a really good point. I actually didn't consider that. So this could have been, there could have been more openings even last year. And like, as you mentioned, they wanted to see, their schools get back into a more solid footing again based on the pandemic. So obviously that's a very honorable approach. So if we want to focus on principals for a little bit now, probably not going to make that skip to the ISD level or county level, but just to the local, the central office role. What specifically opportunities out there are you seeing right now for them to make that jump, whether it's soup or assistant superintendent, maybe even curriculum director, I suppose?
So, there's a lot of, falling dominoes, as we refer to it. So, a big district hires a superintendent from a smaller district. So then that smaller district is open. And now that smaller district is a perfect opportunity for a first-time superintendent, possibly a building principal that is looking for their first-time opportunity. And so that's one of the reasons that we're continuing to be busy into the summer, is that some of these bigger districts hired current sitting superintendents, and then that opened up their position. And then the other thing to consider as well is that with all this movement, we have retirements happening, as you point out, in those assistant superintendencies and those deputy superintendencies. And so that means that there's other central office positions in bigger districts in which those building principals could possibly move into as an opportunity to move up through the ranks. I remember working with a small district not too long ago, and they said to me, they said, you keep mentioning central office. What is the central office that you speak? And this was a district where there was no central office. I mean, the superintendent was the superintendent, the special ed director, the bottle washer, the bus driver, occasional cook. And so that concept of having a central office was something that was lost on them. But in the ISDs, the RESAs, the big districts, they have central office. They have several directors and assistant deputy superintendents, things of that nature. And so there's definitely going to be some opportunities for building principals to move up if looking to do that.
And I would say not only that, but when you look at the state as a whole, getting back to the state of the superintendency, we've got approximately 50% of the superintendents in the state have less than 5 years of experience. So we have been really trying to work with our districts and manage that expectation and letting them know, like, if you're expecting 20 superintendents to apply with 15 years of experience, like that pool does not exist anymore. So really getting to a place where they're seeing the value in the principals, in those first-time superintendents. And I think there's a lot more of those opportunities out there now. I think there's a lot better chance for a principal finding a first-time gig right now.
Which, points to that importance of making sure that, if you are a principal and you are looking to, move into that superintendency, what are you doing as a principal to prepare yourself? What are you doing professional development wise? What are you doing, to add to your repertoire of skills to get yourself ready so that when you go to that interview, you can say, these are the things that I've done to prepare myself to be a superintendent. I know I haven't done it before, but these are the things that I've done that are like being a superintendent. So I've been in charge of my building budget. I have been sitting in on contract negotiations as part of the district negotiations team. I supervise, a number of people. So what kinds of things have you done as a building principal that translate to being a superintendent? And those are the skills and things that you need to talk about when you're in those interviews and make sure the board understands those experiences that you've had.
So based on all of the searches that you have done, you mentioned some of them just now. Are there any other things specifically that you tend to see districts are looking for administrators that are going to become superintendents, besides what you already mentioned, of course?
Sure. I think the first thing would be just gaining a variety of experience within the district. So if you have an opportunity to, oversee some part of special ed, if you have an opportunity to get involved in attracting some grants or grant writing, those types of things, anything you can do to broaden your experience and your depth of knowledge right now is huge, because they're going to want someone who can speak into those areas when they take that superintendency. So, that would be the first thing I would say.
Yeah. And, think about, you're in a smaller district and, September's coming up and your superintendent is going off to the MASA conference in Traverse City. Step up. volunteer to be the leader in the district for that time your superintendent is not in the district, right? Take that opportunity to seize the reins, if you will, for a day or two while your superintendent is not available for any of those things that may crop up. And so, any of those opportunities that you can, put yourself in to better prepare yourself are the things that you should be looking for.
And, one of the things that we hear from almost every district is attracting and retaining staff. So really doing a good job there, trying new things to attract new staff, being heavily involved in that process, and really trying to build your story around how you can attract and retain high quality staff, because that is in every single superintendent search that we've had this year. I think at least I've done, Jay, maybe you'd agree, I would think that is a huge concern of every board, is hiring, attracting, and retaining staff.
Absolutely, I would agree.
So if I'm a principal, I've decided, all right, I'm going to make the jump, or at least I'm going to put my name out there. I see some postings, I'm going to apply. What are some things that they could or should be doing, whether it be for their own skills or training, maybe interview techniques, networking, to help prepare them?
Sure. So if we're talking professional development, then look to something like the MASA Horizons program or something of that ilk that is preparing those principals and building administrators and central office people that are interested in being a superintendent. I mean, that's a superintendent, preparation program. It's not only, it's how to be a better administrator, but then also how to, possibly be a superintendent somewhere down the line. So that professional development aspect of it is huge. And then, on top of that, when it comes time, when you're starting to look at those opportunities that are out there, be selective. Don't just, throw your resume out at every opportunity that's out there. Be selective, make sure that there's a reason that you're applying for that particular job. It's a district that you started your career in and you're looking to go back. That's, or it's the district that you graduated from, and that's where your parents are and you want to move back to your hometown. I mean, whatever it is, but have a good reason for applying for that job. Don't just apply to everything. Be selective and smart in your opportunities.
And the other thing I would say is this last year has been a great opportunity for people looking to get in the superintendency and to interview, to watch interviews, because of so much happening via Zoom. Birmingham just closed their process and hired their new superintendent, and the Oakland Press shared the link to the interviews. They're all recorded, they're all available. You can go watch those right now. So I would encourage folks to watch interviews, hear the types of questions that are being asked, hear the responses, and then if they have the recording part available, watch the meeting when the board reacts to those answers and questions and talk about the candidates. That'll tell you a lot about framing your answers and the kinds of things you need to prepare for in those interviews.
I really like that Zoom example. I didn't even think about that, honestly, till now, even though we spend so much time and so many things are being streamed, and you don't have to travel, right? That's one of the advantages of doing something like that virtually. So that's a great tip.
I think one of the other things I would say is, if you're a person that's preparing to go into an interview situation, knowing that you haven't been a superintendent, the board knows that too. You don't have to emphasize that. I always tell people, don't make them think that you are a tremendous principal. They need to see you as a superintendent, right? So don't keep repeating what you haven't done. I haven't done this, but I haven't done this, but I watched someone else do this. What you need to do is help them see you in that role. Illustrate the situations you've been in, the skills that you have, how they translate, and spell that out. And that's one of the biggest things I do, is when a candidate comes in and just keeps reminding the board how inexperienced they are, it really hurts the picture that they're painting of themselves to the board. So I think it's little simple things like that, talking about what you have done, not highlighting what you haven't done.
And to piggyback on that, every search that's done, there's a search criteria that's listed with that search. And it says, these are the things that we as a district, as a board, as a community are looking for in our next superintendent. Take a look at that search criteria, figure out the things that you have done that apply to that. And that's those are the pieces that you want to emphasize. Those are the pieces that you want to, to Greg's point, those are the things that you want to talk about. Well, it's looking for somebody that has experience in, in rural districts. This is the experience that I have in rural districts. It's looking for someone that has experience with curriculum. This is the experience that I have with curriculum. And, when you're talking in those interviews, kind of be aware of those I, we statements and make sure that you're, balancing it. It shouldn't be everything is about me. I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. That's a one-way ticket out the door. The board wants to hear how you have worked with your staff, worked with your community, worked with your students, worked with your coworkers on whatever it is, developing the curriculum, retaining the staff, whatever it is. So, kind of balance those I, we statements out so that it doesn't sound like me, 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 me.
Yeah, and back to that search criteria, that is your roadmap for an interview. So what I encourage candidates to do is have specific examples lined up, practice them, rehearse them, know the people's names that were involved in those situations. So when you're going through the search criteria and you see, okay, this piece of finance is important to the board, it's in the criteria. This, staff recruitment, all those bullet points that are in that search criteria, you should really have a specific situation and example prepared for each one of those, because you can almost guarantee there's going to be a question on each.
What's interesting is, because I've assisted with doing trainings. I was a former high school and middle school principal, and I've worked with teacher leaders that want to become principals and interview techniques. And it's interesting because certain things don't change regardless of the level the interview is for, right? In terms of make sure it's a good fit, prepare, practice, rehearse your answers. So it's interesting, even though the context might be a little different about some of the specific things being asked. So I guess final question, again, just because you are the guys that are involved seeing a lot of this play out and helping managing these searches, any other things I forgot to ask you or pieces of advice that you really think these principals should know or should consider when applying for an open position?
I think one of the things that we did talk about is, when you're interested in that job, before you apply for it, reach out to the consultant that's listed as the person that's running that search, have that conversation with them, figure out if it is a good opportunity for you. And if at the end of that conversation, you're like, well, maybe this isn't quite the one for me, then don't apply for it. Wait for the next one. And so that goes back to what we were talking about earlier and, being deliberate about the jobs that you apply for, but reach out to that consultant, introduce yourself, have that conversation with them, let them know who you are, and, kind of get a feeling from them as to whether or not they think that you would be, a good applicant, for this search. And, the kinds of questions that you want to ask them is, you're going to do the research on the district and you're going to ask them some questions about, well, hey, I saw this in the press. What does this mean? How does this, possibly going to impact the search? I heard there's an internal candidate. Is that true? Does that mean that they're, just kind of doing this all for show? All those kinds of things that you want to just kind of get to know. The other thing about that is that, especially if you're coming as a building principal to this particular job, one of the first things the board is going to ask the consultant is, well, why does that person want to, come to our district? Why are they applying for this? And so have a good story for that. And so if that principal calls me up and says, well, this is a district that was, that I grew up in and I'm looking to come back, then I can make that argument with the board. I can let the board know, well, this is a candidate that said that they graduated from here, they're looking to come back home, or they've got aging parents, or they've got grandkids, or whatever it is, right? And so if I have that answer, then when the board asks me that question, I can answer it, and that's a good place to be in.
Yeah, I think those are good points too, Jay. And one of the other things that we talked about just in preparing for these interviews and preparing for the role is, your current superintendent, let them know what you're thinking. Ask them to be your mentor, help you through this process. And one of the other things is see what you can do to get some exposure to your board and how those board meetings function, and understanding more about that superintendent and board relationship, because that's a huge part that they want to know, is that you understand what it's like to work with a board, and how that relationship works, and how that they're going to feel comfortable working with you.
It's really good advice. And I would assume that there's no need for principals to be discouraged if they apply and they don't get an interview, and to really take to heart the idea of being selective and making sure it's a good fit. Because based on everything you said, especially at the beginning and from the other podcast, there's not going to be a shortage of openings anytime soon, right? So even if it doesn't happen this summer, winter time, depending on a retirement point for some people, or by next year, we should still have definitely a good number of openings available. So even if the timing isn't right this time around, keep, like you mentioned, keep working on those skills, keep working on getting some of those opportunities at their own district or building to grow those skills. So that just makes a lot of sense. So again, Greg and Jay, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Is it okay? Do you guys mind sharing maybe with the best way to get a hold of you? If somebody that's listening maybe has a question or wants to pick your brain about something, is there a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the easiest way is if you were to go to the MASB.org website. Jay's contact information, our email and phone numbers are listed right there. My email is pretty simple. It's gregs@masb.org, or you can call me at 517-327-9224. And Jay?
Yeah, same. My email is gregs@mas. Oh, I'm sorry. No, my email is the letter J, Bennett @masb.org. And my phone number is 517-327-5928. But yeah, if you just go to the MASB website, go to the About Us, you can find our contact information there. And we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. We also do occasionally offer opportunities for building principals to come in and do some interview workshops with us. And we're getting ready to gear those up as well. And so once we get the dates on those, we'll make sure we get those over to you so you can share those with your membership as well.
Absolutely. Well, best of luck with the rest of the searches that are going on, and hopefully you're able to take a pause and take a break at some point this summer and re-gear for next year. But thanks again, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having us.
And that's going to do it for season 5 of the MASSP podcast. Remember, you can find this podcast and more wherever podcasts can be found, including the Apple Podcast Store, as well as massp.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day.